Hey, welcome to this video by Creating a Family. Today we're going to be talking about cultural identity and the internationally adopted child. I'm Dawn Davenport. I'm the director of Creating a Family, and we're a nonprofit providing resources and support for adoption and infertility. One of the services we provide is a 1-hour weekly radio show, and much of the information for today's video is coming from the August 5th, 2009 Creating a Family radio show, where we talked about this subject. Our guests for that radio show were Holly McGinnis. She is an adult transracial adoptee. She was adopted from South Korea, and up until very recently she was a researcher with the Evan B. Donaldson Adoption Institute doing research on cultural identity and internationally adopted people. My other guest was Dr. Heather Jacobson. She is a professor at the University of Texas in Arlington and the author of a book called Culture Keeping: A White Mother's International Adoption and the Negotiation of Family Differences. Up until about the mid to late 1970s, adoptive parents were told to bring their children home, love them, treat them no different, and Americanize them as soon as possible. After that, the advice changed. Undoubtedly, there are lots of reasons for the change, partly because America became more accepting generally about its multiculturalism, but also because we started talking to the generation of adult transracial adoptees and asking what their experience was. Keep in mind that adult adoptees are not one ubiquitous blob that think alike and speak alike. They don't. They have wildly diverse experiences and opinions on this. But there were some things that we kind of there were some generalizations that we could make based on what we heard from them. And one was that they wished that they knew more about their racial identity and cultural identity, and that race matters. I think a lot of times as adoptive parents we're uncomfortable talking about race, so we focus more on the issues of cultural and ethnicity. But in fact, what we heard from the adult adoptees is that race does matter. So what they told us is that, and Holly kind of summarized this up, she says that think of the layers of identity as something like the layers of a cake for a transracially adopted person. There is, first of all, and I would say almost foremost, their identity as a member of your family. That is what we would call family identity, and that's very important. But they also have, on top of that, they need to add their racial identity, and then their identity as an adopted person. And because they don't share the race of their parents, we would have to add onto that, on top of that as well, their identity as a transracially adopted person. And then we have to throw onto all of that their identity as from their nation of birth, as well as then we have to, that maybe the cherry on the topping of the cake or whatever would be their identity as an American, because we can't overlook that as well. So all of those identities, that's the goal of internationally adopted people, is ultimately to incorporate all those identities. So what's a parent to do? How can we help our beloved children with this path that they're walking on? I would never underestimate the power of books. I love children's literature, so of course I'm going to say that. But books are so easy, and you can start so young. And we on the creatingafamily.com site under Adoption Resources have a suggested book page where we break out lots of books by country, by nationality, as well as by age, and I would strongly recommend first that is a great place to go. I also recommend culture camps and adoption support groups. All of those are readily available, hopefully readily available where you live, or nearby, and I recommend that. Of course, there's things like dance classes, martial arts, cooking classes, language schools. Those things are also available and are helpful. Celebrating the major holidays of the birth culture is fun as well. And probably one of the most important things that we can do is incorporating role models into our lives and into our families' lives from your child's birth country. On the June 3rd, 2009 radio show, Creating a Family radio show, we devoted most of the show to this discussion, so I'm going to refer you to that for more information. The best piece of advice I can give you is to start when they're young. One of the questions that we get on almost every show we do on multiculturalism or cultural identity is how hard should adoptive parents push their children? And there isn't one general rule, but I will give you my advice. Up until about the age of 10, it's the parent's choice. And you need to be finding things that you as a family can be doing and that you enjoy. And if you enjoy it, your kids are going to enjoy it. And if they don't want to go, I say you just insist. You're the mom, you're the dad. You say what we're going to do as a family, and you do it. But if they're really resisting, I would scratch it a little below the surface and try to figure out why. Truthfully, if you're finding something, if you don't like cooking, that shouldn't be what your family is doing. If you don't like language, don't do that. But if you look, there's going to be some cultural identities that you as a family can do and some adoption support groups that you can do. After about the age of 10, I think you have to start generally allowing your child to have an opinion on all of this. And certainly by the time they're teens, they have an opinion. But that's why you start young. Because if they have friends that are attending the support group or the culture camp or whatever, they're going to be more likely to want to go. And here's a hint. They really are not going for the culture. They're going because they're hanging out with their friends. But you know what? That's fine. Because part of some of the other layers of identity that we've talked about are is their identity as an adopted person and as a transracially adopted person. And they could be working on those identity when they're hanging out with their friends at these adoption support groups. So now I want to tell you another dirty secret of the adoption community. There has arisen this sense of competition amongst adoptive, internationally adopted parents. Of kind of a bragging rights of what they're doing. On Monday we're doing language classes. On Tuesday we're taking Taekwondo. On Wednesday we have chow mein. On Thursday we're doing dance class. And it can just be so overwhelming that it makes you want to just avoid the whole thing, and it makes you certainly want to avoid getting together with these other people because you're going to feel so inferior. My best piece of advice is blow it off. You know, you can't do it all, they can't do it all, and it is quality over quantity. It is important for you to do some things, but it's more important that you enjoy what you're doing, and it's also important that you have family time. It's also important that you just have downtime. So you can do what you can do and no more, and you need to give yourself permission of doing that. And then one last piece of advice. At some point, there's only so much that white American parents can do to help their children on this path. At some point, they have to walk this path of integrating all these different identities alone. You can be by their side, and I think you should be by their side. And you also hopefully will have role models that you've incorporated who have lived this experience. But as Holly described it on the radio show, at some point it's the incorporation on the being level, and only your child can do that. One last piece of advice would be to listen to the October 22nd, 2008 Creating a Family radio show, where we had a panel of adult transracial adoptees. I just thought that show was so helpful from their vantage point, looking back from the ages of 20s, 30s, 40s, and even 50s. Thanks for joining us today.